direction. We're going to start off on this next session, and this is going to be a little extended, but it's a really important group of speakers that are going to present this through the morning, taking us into lunch and the end of the conference. So really important session within the 2 days. So with pleasure, I'm going to introduce Rob Bonanno, who Rob has been a veterinarian in excess of over 30 years working in the dairy industry. Spent a lot of time not only through different parts of Australia, but also did a lot of work in the US. And I think Green Meadows was, at the time when Rob was over in the States, was the largest registered herd in America and was something around 8,000 cows. And also Rob, between practices, has also spent time in a number of other countries as a veterinary director. In 2019, Rob started Apian Animal Health with the intention of helping to develop a herd health partnership program. PRODairy was the result and has achieved stellar growth to now service over 250,000 dairy cattle in 3 states and still growing rapidly. Rob now lives in Nearham South. He's seen the light and moved down to Gippsland, for all that, little biased, with his wife Julie, where they also operate, and this is a little plug here, the Ver Retreat as a side hustle. So I'd like to welcome Rob as the regional lead for PRODairy to how to work synergistically to improve dairy farm performance. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks very much, and thanks very much for the NHIA for the invitation to speak today. It's much appreciated, and I think that one of the things about Apian Animal Health is that we're a big business now. We've got there'd be over 350 vets, 70 sites. We represent a fairly significant footprint in the production animal business, and our PRODairy Herd Health Partnership was established back in 2019, and it has really grown exceptionally well. We work with our people as we call them partners rather than clients, because we try and do it so that it is like a partnership. They're people that transact with our clinics, and we've also got an online portal to make it easy to transact with us. I think that one of the things that people often say to me, what's different about PRODairy? And I think that it's that Apian as a business had accumulated a number of resources, training tools, like service provisions, and we've kind of bundled them all in under the brand of PRODairy. But what we do with that is that we work with farmers to try and help to identify their areas of I suppose, greatest need with their herd health, and to get a bit more insight into the farm. It's funny, like working as a practitioner for over 25 years, where you'd be doing your work at the back end of the cow. We'd have these conversations as an ongoing thing with people, and it's probably a little bit the same as the guys here in the herd improvement industry that are working at the back end of the cow, and you have the conversations. But what we've done with PRODairy is we've taken the conversation from the crush and moved it inside the house, where we actually sit down and have the time to talk and explore and get some insights where we probably wouldn't. And it's funny, because our vets that are actually involved in the program now are telling us that herds that they've worked with for 15 and 20 years, they know more about after that one visit where they sit down and set up the treatment protocols than they did for ages. And it's a really good way that we get an insight into what's going on. One of the other things that we do is we schedule review visits, and we aim to do them every 6 months. It can be hard because, time being what it is, but we aim to schedule about every 6 months where we catch up with people and actually discuss with them things like their medication usage. So one of the pillars of the dairy industry is that we want to try and use antimicrobials more responsibly, and what we're looking at is saying we want to make antibiotics not difficult to get. We want to make it so that there's the thought process behind it. There's a protocol to support the use. And then by looking at what people are using and how they're using it, we get an insight into how we could potentially reduce antibiotic use, not by restricting access, but by proactively addressing problems. So I think that really sums it up, is that we really want to start right back at the beginning. If we identify there's a problem with calf health in the herd, like their mortalities or the morbidity in the calves is higher than what we would like, we'll go in there and we'll start with colostrum. We have a service program called Colostrum First, which involves testing the colostrum for quality, looking at the actually how many bacteria are in the colostrum. Some farms we've done this at have been just mortified by the results, because we're finding that the bacterial contamination of colostrum is a significant factor in their calf health and calf issues. Correct weight for heifers is where farms are consistently seeing poor reproductive performance or poor lactational performance in their first lactation animals. We're actually able to go back and look at what's going on in their heifer rearing and their heifer growing, and actually be ahead of that game, proactively address the problem. And we're also looking at Repro and Milk Pro, which are addressing repro and milk production problems. And that's where I think we really have a lot of crossover with the herd improvement industry. We set up vaccine protocols for the farms, and we find that a lot of farms had their vaccine protocols haven't necessarily kept up with the change in their farm system, and so as they've intensified or maybe changed their feeding regimes, that their vaccine programs may not be up to scratch, in the current environment. And I think that as vets, for a long time, we had sort of stepped away from providing that service for clients. And the reason is we weren't selling the product. We didn't see we had any skin in that game. And it's been a revelation, I think, to me, working again with farms, some of whom I've worked with for many, many years. And then when you actually sit down and ask them these questions, you recognise that I hadn't been necessarily giving them the best of advice. But ultimately, our aim is to prevent problems rather than treat them, and that's where proactive care, hence the name PRODairy, came from. So by benchmarking, by getting heaps of data, like you guys in the herd improvement, you collect a lot of data, but it's what you do with it that determines how valuable it is on the farm. And so we're able to collect purchasing data from our clients, and we know how many doses of particular antibiotics or whatever that they've used. And by looking at that on a per 100, doses per 100 cows, and also benchmarking it against our region, we're able to look at farm data and sort of say that somebody might be, right on the median. So their little blue dot is right in the bar there in the middle of antimicrobial use, and we can say your antimicrobial use is about where everybody else in your region is, and you're going okay. People might want to be better than that. And sometimes being lower doesn't necessarily mean better, but at least it initiates the conversation. We're also able to look at things like month of purchase of product. And so we can see whether there's a seasonal pattern or a regular pattern of the use of the drugs. And for example, right up the top here, we've got intramammary use. You can see that this person purchased all their intramammaries in February. So I'm betting, without even knowing what farm that is, it's probably an autumn calving farm, because they've dried off, ready for an autumn calving. We're able to look at the time they use other products, and we might have one down there, Auburn and eye ointment, I think. And so you can see that they've got a little bit of winter pink eye, but also typical summer pink eye. So we might initiate some cultures on that farm to try and identify whether they have a Moraxella bovis, Moraxella bovoculi, different issues at play. So we're able to get some pretty good insights into what's going on the farm just by using our data. I think that one of the most common things that we do when we sit down with people, though, and talk to them is we discover that they've got fairly typical and consistent problems that maybe we're not addressing well as their vets, and other service providers are all sort of at the periphery of dealing with it, but nobody's necessarily taking it on and taking it to heart. And so, repro problems, milk quality problems, these give us some options and some opportunities to talk with them about, antibiotic usage and about, trying to identify what the core problem is. Here's a really interesting one we look at, and it's the antimicrobial use by class. And in this farm here, you can see that they've used 84 treatments per 100 cows of dry cow mastitis. Now, without actually having a good look at that cow's repro performance, I could suggest to you that it's probably pretty good. And the reason is they've dried off about 84% of their cows. Now, a lot of herds, and you can see there the regional average might only be 65% of the cows. So we're getting some insights, and it's not necessarily 100% accurate, but it gives us a bit of a rough idea. The other thing I can tell from this farm is either he's telling teat seal to his next door neighbour or he's doing his heifers. So we're able to get some ideas just from that, which gives us a bit of a heads up as to where problems or issues might be occurring. But then I suppose the purpose of being here is really to look at how can we as PRODairy work with the herd health, and the herd improvement industry. And I guess that realistically, because we're having these one-on-one conversations with our producers, and by nature, our producers that we're working with PRODairy tend to be larger. Our average herd size in PRODairy is over 550 cows compared to the national average. So we're working with the larger herds in general. So a lot of those herds currently aren't using herd recording. They might have things like inline monitoring, they might have some other methods of measuring milk production, but if they run into a mastitis issue, we're able to suggest to them that they utilise the services of the herd improvement industry to try and get some cell counts for us. And then making sure that that information flows two ways is the challenge, and part of the reason why I like addressing you guys here today is because we need to work with you just the same way as we need to get that information back. And the other thing that I think is really important, and it's an observation, not a criticism, is that far too many farms don't get much value out of their herd recording data because they just don't utilise it well enough. It's not necessarily being interpreted for them in a way that adds value. And so we're being asked to help with that. But then, I've got to mention here for Heiko over at Mafra, they're adding some value to some of their herd recording data by doing some reports. And as a business, we're looking to work more closely with them to try and maximise that value. I think that one of the real opportunities for the herd improvement industry and the veterinary industry to work closer together, particularly, as I say, with PRODairy, where we're working to try and proactively deal with problems, is that using the new technologies, things like MIR and some of that fat testing and things like that, we're able to identify herds potentially as early as 30 and 40 days into lactation where they might be having some issues around metabolic problems. They might be having some issues around excess mobilisation of body fats, and that is going to give us a tool where we can help those farms to get ahead of a problem rather than finding out 6 weeks after mating's finished when we're preg testing the herd that they had a disaster. And so if we as an industry, as vets and the herd improvement industry can work together to try and sell that value and say to people, here we've now got a predictive tool that we can use to actually improve not just your herd today, but predict and prevent a problem that potentially is going to happen into the future. I see that as being a massive, massive win. I can't have an opportunity to talk to herd improvement people without mentioning herd identification. Oh my God, if you guys can get freeze branding so that they're legible and perfect, you'll have done us all a favour, because one of the things that poor herd identity does is it makes things like transition management difficult. If people can't get the right cows out at the right time, they can't draft them and sort them. If you get preg testing lists wrong, if you get even worse, PG lists wrong, cows that are in sync programs getting the wrong injections at the wrong time because they're misidentified. So I think that whenever I talk to a farm, one of the things I talk to them often about, if they've got poor identification, is get onto your herd improvement association, get some freeze brands on these animals, get them so we can identify them. And repro clearly is the area where often vets and herd improvement associations are seen to be in competition and can clash. I don't agree with that. I actually think that really the opportunity is more for collaboration than it is for competition. We often help to develop sync programs, we review programs, we do all that type of stuff, and there's an increasing opportunity for us to work collaboratively as an industry and as our business to actually achieve goals and do it in a way that's economic. I think that I've covered most of what I'm going to cover. I've cut into my question time, which is good because that means it doesn't give you the opportunity to question me. But come and chat to me in the breaks or afterwards. I'm happy to always answer questions. We've got a few of our PRODairy people here in the audience, and pleased to see everyone here, and thank you very much again for having me.
Thanks very much. Do you have one up here? Let it be. I'm not sure again, but PRODairy keeps records of farmer purchase of drug usages. Is it possible to encourage farmers to record treatment on individual animals, which is a comment that we had from one of the presentations?
Absolutely, that is a really, really good comment and a really good question, because I think that if I compare what I see daily working with herds in Australia compared to when I was working in, say, the US and when I was working in China, is that the amount of accessible health data is poor, to be frank, here in Australia. There's not very many farms where you can just put your fingers on a report that tells you how many fresh cows have had an LDA, how many fresh cows have had ketosis, how much monitoring of fresh cow health is being done, and then that information being recorded. The value of that is just massive. I can't even emphasise how valuable that is, to be able to identify where problems are occurring and move on with them. You might have seen from that medication usage data, there's been times where we've gone out to farms and we've said to them, you're using 40 treatment cases per 100 cows of mastitis drugs, and they say, oh, I didn't think my mastitis was that bad. But then you'll find out that they might have been double treating or they're misidentifying cases, but they didn't have the case records to be able to identify they had a problem. We've identified it from purchase patterns. If we could get people to record individual animals in a way that the data is easily accessible and reportable, that would be awesome.
Okay, we've done time on our questions, but I'm interested to identify the best AI rep in Australia, whoever that is. Obviously, someone's pumped some tyres up. But I think there is an interesting part I'll just raise thank Rob, is the fact about the connectivity between the herd recording platforms and well as some of the on-farm software platforms. So I think that connectivity is going to be really important. So thank Rob for presenting.
Thanks,
and